If you live in North America, you probably know all about the Civic Type R and the Integra Type R. You've probably even heard about the NSX Type R. But many of us here in the Western Hemisphere either know very little or nothing at all about Honda's other Type R model, the Accord Type R. There are actually 3 different versions of the Accord R. The original one for Europe, known as the Accord Type R, and then the one for the Japanese market, which lasted 2 generations, and is known as the Euro R. Yes, the Japanese ones are called the Euro R. I know it's confusing, but there is a reason for that, and I'll tell you about that in this video, as well as cover all 3 Accord R models plus the Torneo R, so let's get into it. The first Accord Type R, the CH1, came out for the 98 model year and was assembled in the UK, mainly for the UK market, but a small amount were made for other European countries as well, which means there are actually some left-hand drive ones out there, like this one I found on Cars and Bids. There were around 2,000 built for the UK, and we can see that at their peak, 1,807 of them were licensed there. Now this body style will look a little foreign to North American viewers, since Europe had their own body style for this generation. So did Japan, actually. In fact, for this generation, Honda tried something different than what they had done before and made 3 separate Accord models, one for Japan, one for us, and one for Europe. So what cosmetically separates the Accord Type R from the regular one? Well, there's a mesh grille, special 17-inch wheels, a front lip, side sills, dual exhaust, and optionally a spoiler. The spoiler was a no-cost option, so I can't imagine very many people got one without it. On the inside, you'll find an interior very different from our Accords, but the dash and the 3-dial gauge design you might recognize as similar to the one America got in the 2nd Gen 3.2 TL. To be clear, it's not exactly the same dash, the glove box is different, the center stack is different, but this is obviously the dash the TL interior is based on. Type R specifics include white face gauges, a 3-spoke steering wheel, a titanium shift knob, and Recaro seats. The Type R gets a stiffer chassis, sits a touch lower, has bigger brakes, and does away with most of its sound deadening in the name of saving weight. But what we really care about is what's under the bonnet. Here we have a hand-built red top H series, specifically the H22A7, which is rated at 212 metric horsepower, about 209 if I convert it to the North American standard, and torque is rated at 215 Newton meters, about 158 pound-feet. Of course, I've never had the opportunity to drive one of these, I'm yet to even see one in Canada, but a reoccurring theme in many articles I read by people who have driven them was, yeah, of course it's got that VTEC kick. But many journalists also commented that it remains surprisingly comfortable and reserved if you just want to drive it normally, in traffic, or down the highway. In fact, in the UK, Honda marketed it as a family saloon that you can take to the track on weekends. Some journalists described it as one of those rare cars that doesn't have to sacrifice comfort for handling. The facelift comes for the 2001 model year. There are new bumpers, the mesh grille is swapped out for a slat grille, probably just so it can use the same one as the other models, and the power retractable antenna in the rear is replaced with a fixed roof-mounted one. The titanium shift knob in the interior is swapped out for an aluminum one. 2002 would be the final model year for the European Type R Accord, and they never got another one. The Accord Type R, as capable as it is really more than just a purpose-built sports car, the way we might think of other Type Rs. The Recaro seats are actually pretty comfortable, it's got good-sized back seats, and option deletions over other Accords are few. You could say no to rear power windows and opt out of AC if you so choose, but if you got these options, well then you've got yourself a pretty decent family saloon. I want to give a shout out to this UK Accord Type R website, which is really well put together and where I got most of my information for this version of the Type R. They've got service manuals on here, even a buyer's guide section where they talk about the common issues. Rust is an issue, no surprise. And these Accords also have auto self-leveling headlights, which were mandated in the UK and are apparently not too reliable. They're even counting down how many are still licensed on British roads, which is not too many. So now that we've covered the European market Accord Type R, it's time to talk about the Japanese market Accord Euro R. I know that sounds weird, but there is actually a reason for that naming scheme. We'll learn about that in this section. Yeah, what do you want? I'm here to enter my car in the JDM show. This is my Accord Euro R. Yeah, Euro Night was last week. This one's for JDM models only. The Euro R is a JDM model. Maybe you're not aware of it. You can look it up. I don't have time for that. I don't need to look things up to know I'm right. What do you mean? You just assume you're right about everything? Oh, you know, I think I've seen you in my YouTube comments, actually. Now, the Japan market Accord, from the outside at least, looks a little more similar to ours. The front end is similar, but is a tad more angry looking, as if to say, I was not built for your lowly American market, so don't even look at me. It's got different, more modern style door handles, and the back again is similar, but different. The interior is much closer to the European Accord interior, and again uses that TL dash. Now, the differences between this Accord and ours run deeper than just cosmetics. The JDM Accord is actually a little bit smaller, and this is done so it can fall into a different category and be subject to less taxes. In Japan, these categories are limited by not only engine displacement, but by length and width. Keep these smaller dimensions and these different car categories in mind, because that's going to come into play when I talk about the Torneo. The Euro R version came out for the 2000 model year, and on the outside it adds a body kit, Euro badging, and dual exhaust. Inside it's very similar to the European Type R. It's got the same Recaro seats, the same steering wheel, and very similar white face gauges. These ones have a few differences, mainly the inclusion of that little car diagram which shows you which door is open, something that the Europeans didn't get. Notice that on the Japanese Euro R, unlike the European Type R, there is no red H badging, either on the steering wheel or on the exterior of the car. I'm sure there'll be some pictures of Euro Rs in this video with red H badging, but that's aftermarket if you see that. Now, you probably know that typically Honda does put red H's only on their Type R models, so the lack of red H's on these cars also ties into why these are called a Euro R and not a Type R. This red top H22A makes 217 horsepower and 163 pound-feet of torque, just a touch more than what the Europeans got. This is the absolute top H series engine there is, and it even makes more power than the JDM H23 VTEC. Of course, it's also paired with a 5-speed manual and a limited slip. Okay, so that's the Accord Euro R, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but there's also a Torneo Euro R. Well, what's the difference between the Accord and the Torneo? It's true that they're basically the same car. There's some trim and option package differences, the front end styling's a little different, the Torneo has a little bit softer lines and more rounded headlights, but you might be wondering why these cars exist as different models if they're so similar. Well, the reason has to do with their dimensions and the vehicle categories that I was talking about earlier. Take a look at the width of these cars. The JDM Accord sedan is 1695 millimeters, whereas the Torneo is 1720. That's very important because in Japan, anything over 1700 millimeters is considered a 3-number car compared to a 5-number car, and that's represented by like how many numbers are on the top of their plate. 3 or 5. And the way I understand it is this affects the taxes you have to pay. And by the way, I learned all this from this video by JDM Masters. I'll link it in the description. This is a must-watch channel for Japanese car fans. He doesn't seem to be active anymore, but he's got a great backlog of old videos you can binge, and you should. So the Torneo has a little bit of a wider track, and you can see that he's pointing this out here, and that puts it over the 1700 millimeter limit. And that's why the Torneo is its own model and not just a trim level or something. The Torneo Euro R uses the exact same H22A as the Accord Euro R. Now, I know you're wondering, why on earth is the Japanese model called the Euro R? Well, this goes back to what I was saying about the European Type R being a little bit more refined and a little more comfortable to drive than, say, a Civic Type R or even an Integra Type R. It's not quite as firm, it's much quieter, and it even has usable rear seats. In other words, because it's a little bit more reserved than previous Type Rs, most Japanese customers would not accept it as a proper Type R model. It's just not raw enough for them. The suspension tuning on these is a bit more suited for longer drives, not as much road comfort is traded off for handling on the track. And from the Japanese perspective, this is something more commonly seen on European car suspensions, hence the name Euro R. You can even see this reflected in the more rounded font they use on the Euro R badge, which looks less aggressive compared to the font on a regular Type R badge. Also note that the Euro R does not use a red H on any of the badging, again meaning that Japan does not see this as a true Type R.
Although it's not red, it's gold. So you can see here very clearly that the Euro R doesn't have red badges on the Honda, not on the front or on the rear. It's not meant to be a Type R.
Euro R models have electric power steering, basically the same system that's in an S2000, but it can actually be adjusted between 3 different stiffness settings. How very European. Again, from the Japanese perspective, a proper Type R would have to have hydraulic power steering if it had power steering at all. The Euro R did get an update for the final 02 model year. It got factory tinted rear glass, an optional red checker pattern interior, new bronze colored wheels, and a titanium shift knob. They also updated the ECU to address cold starting issues, and the gearbox synchros were upgraded to higher quality alloy. This model was known as the Euro RX. What's great about these Euro Rs is they kind of have the best of both worlds. If you can only afford one car, the Euro R is a little bit more practical and a little bit more comfortable. Even the Recaro seats are much softer than what's in a DC2 or EK9. But it's still going to give you that sportiness, that VTEC surge, and that top-notch build quality you expect from a 90s Honda. Of course, in Japan, the Euro R did carry over to the 7th gen Accord, so we'll cover that one next. Now for this generation, Japan gets the same Accord model as Europe, known as the World Accord platform. Of course, we got a different Accord in North America, and we know this model as the Acura TSX. Again, this is a Euro R, not a Type R, and to the Japanese, this is a significant distinction. As our friend JDM Masters puts it in his video, this is the car an enthusiast buys when he's middle-aged, gets married, and has 2 kids. The suspension setup, which is still double wishbone unlike on an FD2, is again more European tuned, and is not only set up for the track. It's very comfortable to drive on the road, even longer road trips. Taking a look at the interior, it's got the same Recaro seats as last year, and the dash is mostly the same as a TSX, but look at this gauge cluster. This is not the TSX gauge cluster, but actually a very similar cluster to the one that's in our North American Accords, except for here it has red backlighting. The 3-spoke steering wheel you may recognize from the DC5. The engine is the K20A High Performance. It has the 11.5:1 compression ratio, and basically the same specs as the DC5, 217 horsepower and 152 pound-feet of torque. The Euro R engine does have some small differences, one of them being a balancer shaft in the crankshaft to make the engine smoother. Again, going to the fact that this car is a Euro R, not a Type R. Like the CL1, the CL7 is another best of both worlds car. I've actually seen one of these in Canada before, since cars only have to be 15 years old to import them here, and it was really cool. I wish I'd taken some pictures of it. It was a red one, it was super nice. But it'll only be another few years until you can start importing these into the US as well, if you can find one. They were produced from 2003 to 2008. I don't know the production numbers, but I'm assuming they were not very common. So where does the Accord Type R and the Accord Euro R rank in your list of favorite Honda products? And would you import one of these? Let me know in the comments.